Hi there, this is Bodhana, back for the second in the series on teaching Nithyananda Yoga in a maximum security prison. So at the end of the last video, I left you hanging with what was the population that I was going to be working with, because it was a surprise to me, and it definitely had a little impact. I'd never taught a population like this before. So just to remind you that I'd met with the warden of the prison, and we were discussing the various units, because remember, each unit is funded separately. So naturally, they want to have the minimum amount of resources leaving their unit. So after the meeting, it was decided that I would actually be working with the most stable population in the prison. And I'm thinking, okay, that's good, most stable population. But as it turns out, this most stable population comprised 40 women, all convicted of murder, first-degree murder. So I was a little shocked, because I don't feel like I knew that I ever met somebody who was convicted of first-degree murder before. So I wasn't sure what kind of people they were. And it was such a contradiction to say that they were the most stable. So naturally in the meeting, I wanted to know a little bit more. So what does this mean? What do they like? Is there any danger? Anything to worry about? And why are they considered stable? So let me give you a brief understanding. It won't go into depth of the prison system, but it might give you a little glimpse. I thought when I entered the maximum security prison in Marysville, Ohio, that I would find more of a African-American population, maybe a little more on the younger side. I was really surprised to find out that the African-American population is less than the rest of the population, which is mostly comprised in the Marysville Women's Prison of middle-aged women, let's say around age 40 to 50, who've been convicted on drug crimes. So I know that most of you must understand and know that our prisons are completely overcrowded in the United States, and they've gone to the extreme of hiring private corporations to run the prisons because of the massive overcrowding and not enough room. Once a lot of the mental health bills were passed and funding was no longer given to mental health services, this is where a lot of that mental health population went. They came into the prison system. Along with the mental health population came the population of women addicted to drugs and alcohol who maybe have also committed some kind of crime along those lines. So then there is the question of what is a criminal. Criminals are only defined in that current time in history based on what we decide is a crime. So anyway, the population of convicted murders is the most stable because they've actually been in the prison the longest. They're all serving life sentences. Most of them will not have parole. Some of the women I worked with came into the prison system at age 18, and they were already in their 30s. So please understand, this population has been there a long time, and they're seen as seniors by the rest of the prison staff. So they're also seen as role models for the rest of the prisoners. So it was decided that this bringing yoga in for this population would be a good test to see how they handled it, and also would they start role modeling it, whatever benefits they got to the rest of the prisoners. So that's where we begin, in a gymnasium of 40 women convicted of murder. So I arrived on that first session, and I had already told you that the resources were extremely lacking. There were no yoga mats, there were no props of any sort, no chairs. I mean, we don't do yoga in chairs, but in the prison population, stress is extremely strong, which results in a lot of disease among the prison population, the inmates. So there was a lot of women really suffering just in their physical body, not being able to sit on the ground, carrying a lot of extra weight. Asthma was there was a high population of asthmatic women. So even just moving around, generally was causing a lot of asthma. So that very first day when I showed up and I had the women, the first thing is they're all standing because they don't want to get down on the ground, because realistically, what if they can't get up? This is the case working with any population of women with different types of mobility issues and weight or obesity issues. It's very difficult to get on the ground and not know if you're going to get up. But what choice did we have? So I got the women down on the ground, and at that time, the way that I started the Nithya Yoga sessions was with a meditation. So for many of these women, they'd never done anything like this. And please understand, there's also a whole issue of language and of bringing yoga to a very conservative rural area of Ohio. What does that mean? That means we know that yoga originated in India thousands of years ago, brought by saints and rishis. Yoga has the most amazing benefits of technology to raise our consciousness. We know that. But when you get into the Midwest of the United States, yoga is seen as something connected sometimes with Hinduism, which is not understood, and which has gotten a little bit of a fear and a bad name. For example, many times I heard the fear that if you do yoga or practice yoga, it's the work of the devil. There's also the attendant symbol of the devil with the trident, which has 3 prongs. And here we are with Shiva with a trishul with 3 prongs. So there's a tremendous amount of misunderstanding about yoga in the Midwest and why one might be afraid to even practice it. Now let's go a step further and talk about a prison population, a group of women who feel that they're only holding on by a single thread, literally holding on, because there's so much fear in the prison and there's so much done to disrupt their daily routine just to keep them in this state of fear. For example, at any time they'll ring the alarms and everybody has to get in lines, and these lines are, you have to be in your space. If you're not in line and you're not in space and account, you might be in for some sort of punishment. So I saw this happen many times. We're blissfully doing a yoga class, the bells go off, and literally the women just panic and they go and they stand in line, and you're not allowed to talk, you're not allowed to move, you're not allowed to do anything until your number is called, and then you're excused to go back. But sometimes they're standing in line in the hot sun, sometimes they're standing in line in the cold. So all of this I'm bringing up because some of them feel that their hold on to life, their hold on to a sane life, a sane part of them is very thin. So in the Midwest, one of the holds that people have is maybe their Christianity or maybe their love for Jesus. So all of these are there for them to hold on to when things are uncertain, or who can know the depths of what one would go through to be imprisoned for already 30 years of your life. The point is they wanted me to be very careful about bringing in things that might upset their stability, that might upset their hold on to something secure. So if I come in and start talking about yoga or Shiva with the trishul, it might bring up these images of a devil, which might really upset them. So what I decided to do is back off on all language. For example, we work very heavily with the 7 energy centers called chakras. So first thing is I threw out all of the Sanskrit words, just to start with. The idea was once they got more and more used to what I was bringing and teaching, I would then be able to reintroduce some of the Sanskrit words, which by themselves, a Sanskrit word can have such a beautiful healing property for the women. So I have a whole script and routine that we came up with in our training, but for this particular population, I narrowed it down to only 3 steps of the meditation and then about 40 minutes of a yoga practice. So let me bring you to the first session. I have 40 women, many of them in a disease state, many of them overweight. And they're now all on the floor, and we're going to start what's called Nithyananda meditation. The first step in Nithyananda is you hold your hands here and you breathe heavily. So I demonstrated. Well, the minute I demonstrated, about half the hands went up and said, we're not doing this. So we stopped and I asked why, what is the fear? They really thought they're going to die. They say, if I breathe this hard, I'm going to die. I have asthma. I can't even get that air into my lungs. Then they start asking questions. How many women have ever died in your class? And I say, no woman has ever died in my class. Then, how many women have passed out in your class? I said, no one has ever passed out. I had to get through a half an hour of the fear questions. Will I die? Will I pass out? Before we could even start the meditation. And finally we started, and I could see as they started breathing in air, because remember Swamiji says we're not just breathing air, we're actually breathing space. And here they're in the prison, so they're breathing maybe space for the first time that they've been trying to avoid. So much fear came through so many of them. But just to Fast forward what's going to happen. I'm telling you, within 4 weeks, which is 8 sessions, so many of the women already started coming out of their disease patterns. It was the most beautiful thing to watch. You could actually see it flowering in front of you. So let me back up. One of the tenets of Nithyananda Yoga is that we set an intention. And so I described this to them, that Nithyananda Yoga can actually recreate your reality. And I said, as a group, we're going to set the intention of beauty. These women don't feel beautiful at all. And within the prison system, they're just treated like not human. They're seen as a population that shouldn't get anything. And so when Nithya Yoga was brought into the prison, first of all, I was despised for bringing it, because now I'm the symbol of somebody who's giving these women something when they deserve nothing. Second of all, the women themselves are now being looked down upon more poorly because they're getting something. And this is primarily, I can say, from the paid staff who has this view. So we worked on beauty. And so every session, the first thing we do is we all close our eyes and hold the space of the word beauty and how that feels inside the body, how it looks outside, how it's radiating. Then, one of the principles of Nithyananda Yoga is, with every movement, when the intention of beauty is thought of, that concept, that idea will get anchored in the actual muscle memory, so that the reality starts getting created from the inside out and will radiate out. So we did this concept of beauty, and I could just see how tender it was for them. Maybe a word that they hadn't heard for years, maybe a word that they longed for, that they maybe never thought they'd have again. I can tell you, after 6 weeks, we're talking about 12 sessions, many of the women were being stopped and asked within the prison system, did you go to a spa, or did you get some money? Did someone send you money and you got to go out and get your hair done or your skin? All the women started getting asked these questions about their skin and their hair, and nothing had changed except for the 2 sessions a week of Nithyananda Yoga with meditation. So the women were really starting to get convinced. Now, outside the prison, the population of the convicted murderers, women were starting to ask if they could also come to the sessions. So that's a long way off, 6 to 8 months later. Now, the next thing that happened is, after 6 weeks, they gained a lot of confidence. They were now confident to come to me and ask me questions, ask for things. So at the end of 6 weeks, a group of them came up to me at the end of class and they said, we want to ask for something. I said, what? They said, we want a new intention. I said, what do you want? What do you want for your intention? And they said, Bodhana, we want the intention of freedom. And so this is where I'll end this video, with the idea of, now we're going to work on freedom, and what is that going to look like with women who are convicted for life, who have no parole, no chance of parole. How are we going to work on the intention of freedom? So thank you for listening to this on Nithyananda Yoga. Before I go, I want to let you know that you can practice Nithyananda Yoga simply by going to your computer and logging into ENTV. ENTV has 2 Nithyananda Yoga sessions twice a day that you can attend just by on your computer watching. There's also centers all around the world, all around the globe, that have Nithyananda Yoga that you can join. Finally, there's always some new program somewhere in the world. Like right now, coming up in December 1st is going to be a program right here. I've introduced myself as being here in Bididi. Sadashivoham 2016, a blast into enlightenment. So this is a program coming up where we will be doing Nithyananda Yoga every morning. It's going to be an amazing practice, aligned with all of the other products, alchemy products Swamiji is giving us, to achieve the highest state of expansion and possibility for enlightenment. Now, if you're watching this video at another time, I can tell you somewhere in the world there is another 21-day program, there's a 4-day program, there's a week-long program. Just stay tuned, and in the comments I'll always give a link to the current program. So thank you for watching on this second in the series of working with women in a maximum security prison. Thank you. Nithyananda.